Hey, welcome back to the show. Today we're going to use the Mesa MkV 25 as well as the Master Effects Puppet Master EQ in the effects loop to try and get Metallica's tone from that whole load era. For all the years that I've been doing YouTube, I haven't actually touched on this load era for Metallica at all. It's not that I dislike it at all, I just really love the earlier stuff. It was just amazing. I guess looking back, it's easy to pick apart those albums, but at the time, Metallica had to evolve. They were burnt out. They had done some 340 odd shows in 1 year touring the Black Album. They needed to change. They needed to do something that was a little bit cruisy for them. I totally get it now. At the time, I wasn't so sure, but some of those tones on those records are really good, and some of those songs just stand up really well to this day, and especially when it came to the S&M with Bleeding Me and things, I thought that was just a masterpiece, and it was so well done. I always thought of the guitar tone as sort of like the Black Album, but just a little tone a bit fatter, a little bit more mids. But this is the first time I've really delved into the load era tone and put my headphones on at work, and I was really listening to it. And I was actually blown away with some of the coolness of the tones within it. It's very deep, it's very thick. It's borderline on flabby in some areas, but it just suits the songs. So what I've done to try and get this tone using the Mesa MkV as a bass line, we're using the green channel in the crunch mode, and I find that mode just gives it a real thick sort of bassy, boomy channel. It's a lot crunchier as well. Whereas the red channel in the Mark IV and the Mark II C+ mode, they tend to be a lot more liquid. They tend to be more sort of squishy sort of gains. This is a little bit more in your face, a little bit crunchier, but the gains rolled off some. The treble's just mid. The mids and the bass are actually a little bit higher than I usually do, especially the mids. I've wound them up, and that thickens the tone up some. And I've wound the presence back just enough that you still get a little bit of that crunch that you hear in the album, but it's still very dark. And then using the sliders on the output, we've just got a nice thick bass there. The mids are scooped out a little bit, but it's more of a balanced scoop. These boogies are just really high in the mids to start with. And so it really is just a balanced tone, and that's everything to do with the head. On the pedal board, all I've got going on is the noise gate and the Puppet Master EQ, but the head on its own, this is the tone. And that's a pretty cool tone, but it's just lacking those ingredients to make it Hetfield. And that's where the Puppet Master EQ comes in, and this thing, I had no idea it was going to suit this album so well. I was surprised when I was listening to the album and tuning it in with my headphones on just how thick the bass really is on that. It's so thick, it's on the spectrum of being this big flabby mess, but somehow it's still got a little tiny bit of crunch to it. And it's very dark, but it matches that whole rock tone that they had going on. When I was learning the songs for the video, I left the Mark V as is with the tone settings and everything. It's a really good bass line, but I found the Puppet Master EQ was really easy just to tweak in all the different tones. There's a variety of tones on those albums. They're not all the same. But if you're just jamming out to most of the songs, this tone right here will cover it all. It's got a coolness about that tone. It's not a tone I'd necessarily use every day, but it's just got such a huge bottom end. The mids are really thick in it, and the treble's wound right back. It sits great in the mix when you hear the records. But if we just go through a few of the songs now and just change the EQ to make the cuts, you'll just see the difference in the EQ and the tones throughout the album. It's pretty cool. I guess before I get too far ahead of myself, the Puppet Master EQ, it's really designed off the B&B Affix EQ out of Flemming Rasmussen's studio, and he had nothing to do with the Load albums at all, but this EQ actually just works really well with it. So the easiest way to explain it, I guess, is that the low works as like a bell curve and it raises it up and down. The mid is still a bell curve, but it only scoops the mids as you increase the dial. And the high is a high shelf that you can see there. And as you increase it, it raises the entire shelf. And the frequency dials just move the curve or the shelf across the line. So right now it's still set up to capture that fuel tone that I had on the intro. And to me, that's probably the most balanced tone on the records. It's nice and thick and heavy in the bass, but it's got a little bit of crunch and chunk to it, and it's heavy in the mids as well. So I'll change it now and we'll just dial in King Nothing. And I found that the mids on this, it's just cut a little bit more. And the highs is just a little bit more apparent. The highs are more sort of cutting on that intro riff. But I think something like that. And next we'll get to No Leaf Clover, and I thought this was just a really cool song. I know it's not on Load or Reload, but it's in that whole era for the S&M, and it had a lot more mids scooped out than normal, and the trebles were a lot more cutting than that. So I found making this tone, I was going to use the wild overdrive and just have the gain right down, but it just took too much of that bass frequencies out, and you don't really need so much attack in the front end of this. They really did rely on that sort of heavy bottom end, a little bit flabbier. The riffs didn't really need to be so staccato. And I think a riff we can't really go past that's an iconic song is The Memory Remains. And that was just such a dark tone, and it was really scooped. The treble was near on nothing, and it was just really heavy in the bass. That's it. So that pretty much covers all the tones from the Load, Reload era, and it's heaps of fun to jam out to those songs. They're really cruisy, it's good fun, it's a good time. So, but before I forget, Ollie's been sitting there on the perch, and we've got, come here mate, come on. Ollie's been sitting on the perch, but we got him a new friend for the aviary, and it just keeps him company at work all day. I'll put him up here. They are good friends, but they've been arguing on the perch. Come on. But his name's Mango. He's a little pineapple conure. Ollie, oi, oi, oi. But when they're sitting so close, I think Ollie likes to have his own space at times, but he doesn't like anyone stealing the show. He's not going to steal your show, mate. Just settle down. Oh, all right. Well, but anyway, I had a really good time making this video this week. The tones are really fun. The songs are great. Cool to riff out on, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.